mode.
Good morning and welcome to the Virginia SBDC's Google and Beyond Marketing and Managing on the Web. This series is designed to take a look at tools and techniques to help small businesses take their business to the next level. Today's webinar is Disaster Planning in the Digital Age. All of our Google and Beyond webinars are presented by Ray Sidney Smith, Digital Strategist and President of W3 Consulting. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type those into the question window and Ray will do his best to answer them. Without further ado, here's Ray Sidney Smith.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Virginia SBDC Network for having me on the webinars. So today we are going to be talking about disaster planning in the digital age, understanding small business continuity when, not if, disaster strikes. And of course, we're going to be talking about this from the perspective of digital data and the information that you really have here out on the web and on your computers and other devices. So just to start off, 56% of small businesses, or small business in general, don't plan for emergencies. And of course, that leaves us with about 40% of small business that don't reopen after a man-made or natural disaster. Those are really stark numbers that more than half of small business doesn't even prepare for any kind of emergency, and then of course they close and shut down, which of course impacts the economies where they are. And I think it's really important for us all to really drive home the point that some preparation, barring none, I think can be a really fantastic solution to both helping the local economies and sustaining your own business when disaster does strike. So today's goals are going to be to just cover some basics of disaster planning. I want to cover what typically are what are the worst things that can happen as it relates to at least digital information being destroyed or damaged or taken away from you. So I'm going to cover that. We're going to talk about the prepare, plan, and stay informed strategy. It's sort of the big umbrella strategy that most of the governments, both local, state, that is local, state, and federal governments really use as their preparatory language. And that's going to be talking about different types of backup solutions and setting up, communications and all of those other things. I'm just going to talk through a bunch of strategies. This is a part of a much larger presentation that I do that talks about really preparing yourself completely. So we're going to try and mush this all into a little bit of an hour. So I'm going to obviously be jumping around a few items, but for the most part we're going to talk about the prepare, plan, and stay informed function. And then I want to talk specifically about during disaster and post-disaster strategies, some really just basic items that you can deal with. I've picked 7 of them for you out of the normal presentation that I do, so you can just sort of see what we're dealing with and try to implement those strategies all told. So what's the worst that can happen? Well, pretty bad stuff, right? So we first start out with the natural disasters issue. When it comes to digital data, and we're talking about the stuff that sits on your hard drives, on your cell phones, on your thumb drives, and on your computers and laptops that are either in your office or home or car, those things are the items that we really discuss when we talk about what can be damaged or destroyed. Now, of course, damage or destruction are completely two different things. Damage, you presume you can repair and get back some or all of that data. Destruction means that it's completely gone and you will not be able to recover it. So when it comes to natural disasters, we typically have to be concerned about the damage or destruction of hardware, not necessarily of data itself, but the data sits on the hardware, so of course it's sort of implicit, intrinsic. So we want to be able to separate your data from the disaster, the natural disaster, as much as possible, both for short and long-term periods. Okay? So natural disasters can be floods, they can be thunderstorms, they can be earthquakes, extreme heat. People who put their CD-ROM or their DVDs in their car during the summer, okay? Those are things that will end up causing damage or destruction to data, and we want to be aware of those. Those, in my mind, are natural disasters. Putting a CD in a car in the middle of the summer is definitely a natural disaster. The others, you can think about volcanoes. We don't have volcanoes around here. Tornadoes, we don't really have too many of those around here too, but we have them on occasion. Thunderstorms, winter storms, if we have landslides in particular parts of the state. So really think about how those things, can affect your business, and those are the types of things that are really quite dangerous. But remember, natural disasters happen usually in very concentrated periods, and then we either have a short-term or long-term loss of us from our data. Okay, and we want to be able to close that gap so that we can separate ourselves from the natural disaster as it relates to our data, so that we can have the business continue to operate. Okay. Next up we have is the idea of some type of corruption, deletion, or malicious loss of data. Okay, so this comes into play when someone who is a malicious software coder is putting out software programs that basically can do damage to your business, and in various ways. It may happen by competition. It may happen just by you being collateral damage to a greater cause. The people who typically create malicious code have issues against governments and issues against particular policies and all sorts of other random craziness. And so they go out there and they do these malicious attacks, and unfortunately you get caught in the crossfire. And so you have to be really careful about being able to protect yourself from those things. But really, data corruption happens when things aren't maintained. Data corruption happens when things aren't backed up, and things get deleted by accident because there aren't good policies or good installed systems, that might be features or otherwise in your software to keep things from being deleted. And then, of course, the random viral attacks. One note that I made here in this particular slide was that forgetting passwords is a huge issue. We have so many passwords in the world today that it's really easy for us to start forgetting particular passwords. And so we go ahead and we try to use as few passwords as possible across many different sites. That's also a difficulty because that reduces our protection. The more you use the same password, the easier it is that once someone who obtains your password illegitimately can now go out there and use that password to access your data in all sorts of ways, both business and personal. So we try to use the same password, but then we forget it, and now we get locked out of our data potentially permanently. Okay, so that is definitely the worst that could happen, is that you forget your password that lets you into everything. And you think that, oh, well, I won't forget a common password. Well, what if you have a car accident and you have a loss of some kind of memory? You have to have that externalized and in a trusted place so that you can go ahead and do that. Even if it's a short-term memory loss, it can shut your business down. Okay. Next up is theft of data. This can be a physical theft of data, that is, someone literally physically steals hardware and walks away with it, or they can steal electronically, meaning that they can call your place of business and ask someone who answers the phone for a little bit of information, and that allows them to gain access to your computer system, or they can just force attack themselves into the business electronically, digitally, and go ahead and do that. There's a flip side to this, which is that most people lose data because of what we call internal loss. That is, someone inside your company, someone you trust, unfortunately goes ahead and steals that data. And so you have to have metrics in place, you have to have fail-safes in place so that you can know what data you have, and then of course be able to identify when data gets up and walks away from your business. Okay, so theft of data, losing core financial data, losing core assets in terms of data that are customer lists and things of that nature, those are the worst things that can happen in your business, because really at the end of the day, for most of our businesses today, our forgive me a moment, for most of us, the value of our information is the lifeblood and really a large asset of our business. If we lose those assets, we then lose a huge potential for revenue and being able to service our current and past clients. Finally is the idea of some kind of pandemic or nuclear threat or radiation threat to the population and therefore the environment and our business. Okay, so this is where potentially there's a chemical spill. Or chlorine is one that happens quite frequently, actually. So you have large stores of chlorine because it's a cleaning product, and all of a sudden, it goes ahead and gets, something happens. It erupts. It's in a particular space, and it can not only physically damage the data, but it can also then affect the people in the space. And so the people in the space can't access the data until that particular chemical or contagion is then cleaned up in the environment. And that might be in your home or place of business. So you have to be prepared for the worst in that case, which is that, if it's, for instance, a nuclear issue, if there's a fission issue or something like that where you have a meltdown, well, you're not going back to that location ever again. How are you going to be able to continue your business if that particular location cannot any longer be accessed, not because it's physically damaged, but because if you go into that space, you'll be physically damaged, okay? You'll be biologically harmed. So you want to be prepared for all of those things. So how do we really prepare ourselves for those situations? Well, most of the local, state, and federal governments, like I said before, really go into this premise of the concept of preparing, plans, and then staying informed. That is, you prepare the people for the disaster, you develop what's called a business continuity plan, or some people call it an emergency response plan, and you get and stay informed about potential threats. So it's really important for us to really think about these things from the perspective that we want to be able to prepare the people and in getting them together with regard to the staff, materials, procedures, operations, and equipment, all of those things that are absolutely necessary to keep your business operating during any particular disaster. Now, I'm going to be talking sort of in a fluid way here throughout the next 40 minutes or so as we make our way through the webinar, but between sort of digital and just the business as a whole. But underlying all of these comments, I'm really talking about the business as a whole, but understand that I'm going to point out here areas where the digital is really important. Okay, just thinking about that from the digital perspective. But this really covers a business in general as well. And then I'll talk about specifically business digital data when we get to the strategies for during and post disaster strategies. So preparing the people. First, you need to, of course, like I said, determine the staff that's going to do it. You need to pick a lead. You need to find someone who is going to be the primary point of contact for handling emergency preparedness. And this is a person who's going to be an advocate for the program and someone who is going to be able to help people understand how to do this stuff both for the business purposes and also for themselves personally. So remember, if your staff has home issues because of an emergency, that disrupts your business as much as it does if you have the business disrupted at its place of business. So you really need to be able to make sure that there is cohesion in the emergency preparedness strategy. You really need to make sure that if I'm a key employee of your company, and like you are most likely, and you have a home issue that's an emergency, you need to have procedures and operations and the necessary equipment in place that if something were to go wrong, you can deal with that and continue to operate the business. Okay? So pick a lead. Next, of course, is to establish good procedures. Good procedures include, right at the top, succession of management. Okay? Most people don't think about this, but if an emergency happens, the worst case scenario happens, a natural disaster strikes, and unfortunately you or another one of your management team loses the ability to make those decisions, whether that be through physical or mental incapacity, you now have lost the ability to potentially sign checks, to be able to sign legal documents and do other types of things. Someone needs to be able to have something in writing, go to your business attorney, business counsel, and make sure that you have the appropriate things in place so that at least one person in addition to you has the ability to step in place when you are not there. As well, if you have a large enough business, some of us are solopreneurs and have smaller business footprints, but if you are a larger company and you have a company headquarters, you want to make sure that at least one person who is in that succession of management perhaps works as a teleworker or someone who works in a different office, because again, if the unfortunate circumstance happens that, like 9/11, when, what's the name of the company that lost, almost their entire floor and therefore almost their entire company, you know, they were all in the same space, and so therefore they didn't have the ability to have a succession of management in that sense. You want to make sure that you have at least one person outside of the space who might have that. If you're a solopreneur, you might want to appoint a family member or someone that you trust that can step into place and talk to business counsel so that they can, you know, an attorney, so that they can make sure that you have the ability to take over should you not be able to, or should the right people not be able to, and you're not even accessible. You know, it may just be the fact that you're not accessible. Next up, in regard to procedures, is identifying the suppliers and the other folks that support your business on either a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. You don't know how long you're going to be separated, whether it's going to be long or short-term separation, especially when it comes to natural disasters. A winter storm can last a week. A tornado can do damage that will last several months. So you've got to figure out who are the people who supply you, and you need to make sure that you develop relationships with not just one of those companies that can do that, but potentially several, in case the person that you primarily deal with was no longer able to satisfy your service needs or product needs in order to support your business. Okay, so then you want to, of course, create a contact list for those critical people. Okay, now where do you keep this list? Well, you don't keep this list locked in a vault. You do not keep this list in only digital. You want to make sure that you have this list in both places, some place that you can access on the web in a secure environment, you know, if it's secure data, you know, but you also want to make sure that you have it on you. You have it in a place where you can, you know, grab it and go. In the sort of survival world, we talk about what they term bug-out bags, and bug-out bags are basically these survival kits that you have prepared. That if you should have to leave home immediately, you get up and go. There's funny television shows, reality television shows based on this concept of survival gear. Well, your contact list for those critical business partners is your bug-out bag. You need to make sure that you have those in case of emergency. You need to be able to keep them with your other important documents, grab them and go. Okay? You want to prepare in the digital sense, especially for the disruption of utilities. That especially includes power. So have you ever gone to the bank and they have had some type of power outage or a system network issue, and you can't do any of your banking? You know, they've got to do it all in paper, and it's going to take them another day or two for your transaction to really be processed. Well, think about that on a larger scale, and how you would deal with the disruption of your business's operations should you not have particular utilities. For instance, internet, you know, and therefore web access, the power and having a generator perhaps. I mean, if your business really does need the support of power on a regular basis, you know, if I can't connect to a computer, I don't have a business at all. And so I really do need to make sure that I have power at all times, and how that's going to work. And so making sure that if I'm going to do those things, I have backup batteries, I have chargers on me, all of those things prepared so that I can just pick up and go. Make sure that you talk about this, have this conversation with your service providers. Do they have alternatives, and can they provide backup solutions? So you might have a short-term disaster where a telephone line might go down. How can you pick that up on the cellular network and use your mobile devices to be able to do that? Or vice versa. Should your mobile network go down, will you have a backup in the landline perspective so that you can go ahead and make the continuity change, just forwarding numbers or whatever it might be? Then continuing down the establishing procedures part is providing additional storage and so forth for regular things in the business. Those might be food storage or product storage that requires refrigeration or other types of things. You know, having dry ice in case you can't use refrigeration equipment. If you have a restaurant or a retail location that has those types of food products, you need to be prepared for not losing potentially a huge amount of inventory. You know, if you lose everything in a restaurant's kitchen in a day because of an accident, and you know, or some kind of other disaster, you've lost, you know, potentially a week's worth of food or even a month's worth of food in the kitchen and the freezers. So preparing yourself for what can happen in those scenarios is going to be really important. Also remember that if you have digital data that is sitting on temporary, people always do this, they have temporary or you know, devices that have little tiny batteries inside them. And when those batteries give up, they delete the data. They delete what's considered temporary information. This happens on telephones and on telephone systems, and certainly on laptops and so forth, where they hold this temporary information. Once the battery dies, they may be in a sleep mode instead of being fully off and therefore saving the state. Make sure that you have those settings in place so that you can prepare for utility disruption and get yourself going in that regard. So we're still on establishing procedures. So again, you want to go ahead and make sure that you plan what's going to happen if your building and or store is not accessible. Okay, so it's continuing inside the procedures. You're going to talk to your lead that you've appointed, and you're going to figure out how you can go ahead and consider running your business from different locations and developing relationships with other companies that might be able to have you be housed in their facilities, okay? So if you need to be able to, if you're a bakery or if you're a tax accountant, it doesn't matter. If you need to reset up your business in a different location, you need to know where you might be able to do that in a heartbeat, okay? If it's tax season and there's a huge storm, there's a hurricane, and you need to get out and continue to keep filing tax returns for your clients, you need to do it. And so therefore you need to be able to figure out that your location's not accessible. We need to move the data, and we need to be able to access it from another location. Think about payroll continuity. Your people still need to be paid even if your business location isn't accessible. If you're still operating your business and you owe them funds, payroll needs to still be processed. How are you going to do that? Figure out how you're going to actually be putting together your emergency plan and crisis management procedures. I can't really get into the details of those today, but I'm going to talk about emergency planning on the most general level so that we can go ahead and figure out some of those things on that level. So the emergency response plan, or what I call the business continuity plan, or what most people call the business continuity plan, is really the ability to be able to, one, plan and figure out what you're really going to do when disaster strikes, okay? So it starts out with getting the right people in place and thinking about all of these different areas of your business that need to be handled, payroll continuity and tax filings and crisis management procedures and all those other fun things, right? So you go ahead and you start planning. You have your team come together, you talk about what the particular issues are, and you figure those out, okay? There needs to be a broad cross-section of people throughout your business who help figure out what those things are. So, as many parties or players in the game as necessary to be able to help you figure out what the various aspects of the business are necessary to keep it going need to be involved, okay? Write down your plan, okay? So many people go ahead and tell me, oh yeah, we've thought about this, we've got a plan, we're good to go. And so I say, show it to me. Oh, we haven't written it down. Well, then you don't have a plan, okay? If it's in someone's head, then it's not a plan, okay? It is a dream. And dreams are not reality when disaster strikes, okay? You need to make sure that you implement on the most basic level paper plan that you then share among your people, okay? Now, that also means that you have to have it in digital format because paper can be destroyed, you might leave the plan at the office, and so on and so forth, so you need to make sure it's digital, potentially in, sometimes what some companies do is they have a centralized email account. They have the one, they'll create a temporary Gmail account or something like that, or maybe just one email account that you use in your business, and it's called emergency@yourbusinessname.com. Okay, and they have this account. Everybody has access to it. They have the username and password to it, so they know how to access it. And they just basically email into that the inbox of that particular account, or they file it, save it in one of the folders, all of the necessary information that they would need so that they can go ahead and access their plan in a digital way. And then if you need to replace something, you just email a new document in and delete the old one. And so you can do this with the Google Drive. You can create a Google Drive account with a folder that just says emergency plan or emergency plans or business continuity plan, whatever you want to call it, and give access to all of your employees so that should they be not at the office, can't access the office, can't get to the paper, they can run to their nearest, wherever, office supply store or home, and print the item, and now they have it in paper and can they can effectuate the plan. Okay. Keep your plan updated. This is the worst thing that you can do once you have a plan, is to not review the plan on a regular basis. Very similar to your business and marketing plan. You have to make sure that you're looking at the plan and you're making sure that it still applies. You'll find that, you know, years pass and no big things have happened, so we stop thinking that there's an issue. But the reality is that once a disaster strikes and you open up the plan and you dust it off, you realize that 3 people have changed in the company and they're no longer involved, and the information they had in their head was gone, and so therefore you should have really had more robust information in the plan, and things have become outdated. Passwords have changed. You need to keep that plan updated, okay? And then finally, practice, practice, practice. You really need to practice drills to figure out when these threats happen. So just like you had a fire drill when you walked in, you know, when you were in elementary school, you really need to make sure that you practice what you are planning, okay, on the most basic levels. Just walking everyone through the process of, if there's a fire, this is what we're immediately picking up and walking out of the office. No more, no less. And this is what happens when, you know, there's a chain of calls, you know, when we have a disaster, winter snowstorm, we're closing the office, who are we going to call and how are we going to get the word out? Usually there's a call chain, and you're going to make that call, and everyone's just going to call each person in that chain to make sure it happens effectively. So just practice. It doesn't take much time, and it will potentially save so much other grief and potentially save your business in one of those disasters. In the plan, one of the things that is frequently not covered is insurance. Insurance is, of course, something that you should have in your business insurance, just general liability insurance, and you should find out what it covers, what it does not cover in the case of all of the various threats that I talked about earlier. But as you learn more about different types of threats and potential threats, adding those to the emergency response plan or the business continuity plan so that you understand the characteristics of the insurance necessary. Understand your deductible, okay, and make sure that's a part of your plan. That is, you've set aside the deductible in an account that people can access in the event of an emergency, so that you can go ahead and do that. And find out what records your insurance provider will want to see should an emergency happen, and make sure that those are stored in a safe place. So you don't have any pictures of any of your inventory, or you don't have an inventory or a stock list or something like that, and then your building blows up, you know, and you can't access it, or whatever it might be. Someone steals stuff out of the store. Well, now the insurance provider will come to you, a claims adjuster will show up and say, okay, well, show me your inventory list. Well, you don't have one, and then you have to go through even more rigmarole and potentially be denied the claim because you didn't do that. So just taking simple photos, making sure that you have very detailed lists of what you have in terms of inventory, and make sure you have that there. Encourage everyone in the business to make sure that they have emergency supplies, both, as I said earlier, as individuals and so forth, but they're at the office spaces as well. Wherever you're working, you should definitely have weather radios or access to weather alerts so that you can tell what's going to be happening on those levels. And know that when there is inclement weather, is there equipment outside? Is there stuff in particular areas? Just like the CDs in the cars. You know that it's going to be 90 degrees today. You better make sure that you go into the cars and you pull those backup hard drives, or the CD-ROM or DVD-ROMs that are out there holding sensitive data for the business, out of your car trunk and bring them into the cooled air so that they can stay an effective temperature. Temperature is a computer's worst nightmare, okay? Temperature, the heat will melt the equipment, degrade the equipment, and potentially corrupt the data, okay? So making sure that you have maybe a NOAA weather radio and extra batteries. Make sure that you have, of course, a list, an index of the important records that you're going to keep in the plan so that people know what important records are necessary to be able to put together in your business bug-out information kit and head out there. That might include the building layout, you know, a floor plan. It may be the insurance policies and bank account records, the critical people that you need to go ahead and contact regarding your supplies and shipping and so on and so forth. All your computer backups, the digital data backups, making sure that you have emergency or law enforcement information on hand, and making sure that all the other priority documentation for your business is in sort of a centralized place. In the business, you should definitely also have flashlights and emergency lighting. I don't know how many businesses I go into, and they don't have either. And just making sure that you have just basic things like that so that if lighting goes out, if power goes down, you at least can get around and out of the building safely and effectively. Making sure that you have spare parts, especially hard to replace parts. So especially when it comes to computers, if something is a critical server in your business, this happens quite frequently, critical server in your business, you only have one, and then it goes down. And now you have to wait 2 or 3 days before someone can even overnight, a critical, hard to replace or a rare part. And that slows down your business and cuts off income potentially. At the very least, it causes a conflict with your customers. You want to be able to make sure that you can store an additional hard-to-replace part, or at least know how you can access those things in quick speed when they do happen. I know that sometimes people don't want to spend the extra money to have a piece of a part or something like that sitting around in inventory that might have cost them quite a bit of money, but they're not utilizing it. Well, think about the loss of revenue that you would have should that part not be in place, and it becomes a little bit more palatable to have it on site. You may even want to supply it in distance, within driving distance or so forth, but off-site should you need to be able to, use that hard-to-replace part or that rare part in equipment off-site should the business not be accessible. And then finally, make sure that you have first aid supplies. First aid supplies are really important in the course of all of these things. Communication. Communication needs to be in the plan, and making sure that you know how to update customers, update employees, update vendors, update everyone that is a party to your business so that they know when an emergency's happened, how to communicate that information out to people, what to say, because you don't want them writing all caps emails that say, oh my gosh, the world is ending, the business is ending, go save yourself. That shouldn't be the email, but having a clear template of language that is used in every kind of crisis so that people have a consistent message so that they know that you're addressing the disaster, telling them not to put themselves in harm's way should they be interacting with your business and it might actually cause some kind of harm to them if they were to come to the location, and being able to do it effectively, meaning that communicating with people in a way in which they'll receive the information in a timely fashion and be able to react to it. Okay, so plan how to update your customers. Tell government officials, know which government officials to tell when these disasters happen. So knowing how to communicate with local, state, and federal government officials is going to be really important, especially when it comes to getting them updated regarding emergency information, but also so that you're able to get emergency assistance when you need to continue your essential business services or getting your products to folks, especially if you're a commodity product, you're selling food or those types of things. You want to make sure that if you're in a location where there's been a disaster, you want to be able to get the immediate emergency assistance, bringing in mobile refrigeration and those types of things, knowing the right people to go to so that you can get those immediately so that you can continue to keep serving food to the public who may not have food can happen, okay? As I said before, set up a telephone call tree. Make sure that you have passwords for the company accessible in some kind of secure but accessible fashion for the key employees in the business. Know how to send out email alerts. Potentially have a call-in number. That's a centralized, out there call-in teleconference number, maybe with recording, and it has all of the instructions for employees in case of an emergency. Know that when you're with with your staff and something goes down, there should be, and you get separated, for instance, or if you're out of town and you don't, make sure there's a centralized place that people can call to or from to make sure that you're okay or that you can learn that they're okay. It's really helpful to have a centralized place. I saw a service a couple of years ago where you basically have an email address, and you can email this one email address, and you send an email to it or a text message, and it automatically broadcasts to everyone that you've dedicated an I'm okay message, okay? And so systems like that can be really, really useful. One of the recommendations I've read is to provide all employees with wallet-sized cards with specific instructions on how to get company information in an emergency. I think that's a really great idea. Everybody gets a little, maybe laminated card or a small card with the specific instructions. Maybe that call-in number to get the I'm okay message, or to alert you that they're okay, as well as to get passwords to key information should they need to. And just, of course, making sure that all of that emergency contact information is up to date on people's records. So that should someone have, a heart attack or a cardiac arrest, they go into cardiac arrest, or some kind of other medical issue happens, knowing how to effectively address that issue, especially if they are your IT guy. So go ahead and make sure that you have that plan and get that in place. Okay. Next is the stay informed functions of the prepare, plan, and stay informed concept for emergency preparedness. Well, when it comes to digital stuff, it's really important that you go ahead and stay informed of where your data is, okay? We live in a very mobile world today. More and more of our data is showing up on our mobile phones and on tablets and laptops and so on and so forth, thumb drives, more electronic data. I have a pen, and it stores data that I write. Well, now I have to know to make sure that that data is backed up from my pen, okay? So data is showing up everywhere, and making sure that you know where that data is as important so that you can protect it as is knowing about the various types of disasters that can happen and can strike the business at any time. So here is the Virginia Department of Emergency Management website, and they have a whole host of information for you to be able to ready yourself for an emergency. So on the website here, I'm circling it right now on your screen, but you can see that it says Ready Virginia. If you hover over that, there is this page, which is the Stay Informed page. If you go to the Stay Informed page, you can see all sorts of information about orders of evacuation from government officials on the state level. Notice on a local, state, and federal level, there are all these kinds of websites that can give you these types of information, typically with a .gov extension, so that you know that they're official websites. And you can see that they have all the various different types of alerts options. So if you're a Twitter person like I am, you can subscribe to their Twitter feed, and then, of course, have it notify you on your mobile phone so that when if a disaster does hit, you can go ahead and do that. You can say, oh, I just saw a tweet that said such and such is happening with power in that particular community. I have an office there. I know that that's not going to be a place where I can operate now. So let me figure out how to go into the plan and start making action. Okay? If you're better off just getting a text message, they have text message options, or YouTube, whatever it might be, you can go ahead and figure out what's going on from them. They also give you all of these options for learning about different types of disasters, from active shooter threats to chemical and hazmat events and earthquakes and extreme heat and so on and so forth. We suffer from all of those here in the Commonwealth, and we need to be prepared for those types of issues when they arise. Now, when it comes to the unfortunate case of an active shooter in Virginia, probably don't have to worry about that regarding your digital data unless they're threatening to take away the data physically from you, and that was their reasoning for taking that stuff. So think about that in the plan. What happens if someone were to come in, an assailant were to come in armed, threatening your staff or yourself for digital data? Well, how will you respond? Okay, will you have a backup? Will you relinquish the data immediately to the person so that they don't harm you or your staff? Making sure your staff knows the appropriate means in order to do that. Call local law enforcement and make sure that they know that they come in and maybe do training with your staff so that they're aware of, so that those people who are trained can make you and your staff aware of the best strategies to be able to respond in those types of dangerous environments. deciding on safe rooms and those types of things can be also a really great thing. So get informed and stay informed of what's happening as it relates to emergency management. So that's the state level. Like I said, there are local levels. You can go to your town, city, county. They all probably have some level of readiness or emergency preparedness information available to you either on the web or at the city hall or something like that, and you can go ahead and get that information. And then this is Ready.gov, and this is run by FEMA, and this has a specific business section. You can see right up here we're on the business page. And the business page, of course, has implementation plans. They even have a piece of software that helps you develop a business continuity plan, and they have abilities to put kits together for your staff so that their home situations are prepared for in terms of disasters. And they have a whole area on here about digital IT support in terms of disasters, so that you can get yourself, again, informed, and then you can stay informed of all of those things. Down here in the bottom right-hand corner, this is American Red Cross Ready Rating. It's a really, really cool tool that helps determine whether your business is prepared for particular types of disasters that can strike. So I would recommend that you go straight to Ready Rating, go to the Ready.gov, go to the business page and click on the Ready Rating, and go ahead and figure out whether your business is prepared for disaster. And then from the assessment, go back to Ready.gov and start completing the business continuity plan templates that they have here. And it shows you how to test and exercise the plans, gives you really a lot of great information. So a robust site and certainly worthwhile checking out. So I want to close up with some during and post-disaster strategies. So for each kind of disaster, as I say here, you need to develop a strategy to either prevent, replace, or repair, and sometimes all of the above, your digital assets from and or after damage. Okay, that comes into place when you have natural disasters, corruption, deletion, and lockout, theft, and then chemical and contagion. All right, I don't have more than the time we have here to this morning, so I'm just going to cover 7 of the strategies that sort of touch most of these 4 different types of things that typically affect digital data. So I'm trying to focus on that, and so I'm just sticking to these broad-based themes, and we'll just cover 7 different strategies. So our first strategy is sign up for disaster alerts. These are really simple to do, but like I said before, people don't do them. They have local, state, and federal agencies that provide these. Here in Virginia, we have capitalalert.gov. If you go to capitalalert.gov, it's a portmanteau of capital and alert, but you just mesh the 2 together. You can see it there on screen. But go to capitalalert.gov and sign up. You can get it by text message, by tweet, by email, by RSS feed. However you want to get the alert, it will tell you when things are happening so that you can learn about emergencies before they may affect you. Something that says, a tornado has touched down in such and such place. You can then quickly get your staff mobilized and move to safety so that you're able to go ahead and have an effective response strategy. Okay, so go out there and sign up for the disaster alerts. Remember that a local alert is not going to come from the federal agencies typically. Okay, they're going to talk about things that are affecting much larger regions. So you probably want to sign up for each of those layers. Your state's going to be able to provide much more localized information, and then your local government is going to be able to provide even more information, okay? So you want to really hit it on all 3 levels, all right? And making sure that you're getting those alerts. They're not going to be often, but they certainly are important to receive. So you want to make sure that you go ahead and sign up for the alerts on those levels. So go look at your particular agency. Here in this particular case, you can go to ready.gov and get those alerts. You can go to this particular website, capitalalert.gov, but if you happen to be outside of Virginia, you want to go ahead and find your state's particular ready alert system and get yourself signed up, and then of course look to your localities for whether they have them as well. Next up is alarm and detection or alert systems that really, they help save lives and data loss. So what do I mean by that? Well, an alarm system is pretty simple. It prevents people from breaking an entry, or at least you know who broke in and entered, or at least it leads law enforcement to find out who that person is or what that is. But digital disaster strikes when people take things. And so you need to be able to go in and either detect that things are being taken. That could be financial software, that could be other types of software that basically says, hey, something strange is happening. You should know what's going on. So for instance, my bank shoots me a message whenever a debit or a credit goes in or out of my bank account for a particular amount of money, okay? Well, now when that comes to me and I didn't do it and I didn't authorize it being done, I now know that something is awry and I need to make action, okay? So detection and alert systems help you make sure that your digital financial data, those types of things, are being secured and safely managed on that perspective. You can have wireless motion detectors. You can have a non-alarm system, but literally an auditory system or an audible system where you just basically put these little things on windows, and when the windows open, it just blares a really loud sound so that you can prevent people from entering the building because they're now alerting the entire community or everyone in the building that they've now broken into someplace. So different kinds of ways in which you can do this, but think about how alarm systems and alert systems, both from the traditional alarm system concept that you probably think about, but also software. Lots of different types of software systems out there that can help you determine when something is awry. For instance, Google Apps, all of you probably know that I'm a pretty big fan of Google, and Google is Google for businesses, of course, and they have what's called Vault. And Google Vault helps you establish a variety of metrics and fail-safes so that if a staff member who doesn't have the authority or shouldn't have the authority to delete something tries to, it blocks them. It also goes through the process of actually archiving particular types of financial data and legal documents and so on and so forth. So it has this automated sense of automated presence so that you don't have to actually think about it. You sort of set it and forget it, and it starts to do all of that stuff in the background. So this is a part of your emergency planning, because should something like this happen, it can prevent the issue from happening altogether. And then, of course, you can access the information and establish what happened along the way should something go awry. Okay, so alarms and detection and alert systems are really, really great. Making backups. There are the three kinds of backups, and you have to have all three. Okay, those are long-term backups, short-term backups, and off-site backups. So what a long-term backup is for is accidental deletion. So say I have a document that I worked on Monday, and then a document I worked on Tuesday, and then a document I worked on Wednesday, and then 3 months later I have a complete loss of my hard drive. Well, in the process of that, every month you would presume that I was backing up that data and putting it onto an external hard drive or onto something else like that, and then it just stays there for the month, for example. You have to figure out how much information you add to your computers to really determine how often you want to do that, but let's just say it's a month. So you have a monthly backup, and that external hard drive goes off-site once a month. It comes back and gets backed up again and then taken off-site once a month. The short-term backup is for basically when something dies, basically. If you have a hard drive that dies and you need to come back up and running today, you don't care about the short-term loss of data. Maybe you lost a day's worth of work, whatever, but you didn't lose a month's worth of data, and you need to immediately get back into action. You want to have that short-term backup that you can immediately push right back into the system and get you working as fast as possible. And then finally, you have the off-site, which means that you have your computers here in your office, you're working away, and then something happens, and you are now going to be disconnected from the data that's here locally. You need to have that data moving from this physical space to that physical space so that you're able to continue the continuity of your business services. Okay? That means that you might want to try a cloud-based backup service that takes the information from your computer and puts it up into a secure cloud environment. You might want to think about doing some kind of off-site storage where you're actually mailing it somewhere or taking it home somewhere and having that accessible so that that can be done. But it needs to be off-site, okay? And it needs to be far enough away that should something happen to a particular community, like that could be your home and business, that you're still capable of accessing that. So think about it from the perspective that you find out there's a disaster and you need to leave your home and place of business immediately, and you're not going to be able to take your physical data with you. How are you going to access that information off-site to continue your business? That's where it should be, okay? So think about that from the perspective of off-site. Next up, I say lock everything up, even though typically you are locking things down onto physical products. But if you don't want your thumb drives, your desktop computers, your cell phones, and external and your monitors and so forth to walk out of your offices, actually a couple of years ago I was talking to a attorney friend, and we were in a casual environment, and we were just talking about different horror stories as it related to technology stuff. And he had his computer and his backup hard drive sitting there in his office, in his executive office space, and he was working along. He went to the bathroom and came back, and someone had stolen both the computer and the hard drive that was sitting on top of his computer. And so he had no physical security. He didn't lock it up. Now, I also say lock everything up, literally, in the sense that it shouldn't be on the ground, okay? It shouldn't be where things can flood. Computers and digital data in general have a desire to stay dry, okay? Humid environments and certainly moisture in the sense of, full liquid, sitting inside of, sitting in liquid, computers do not last very long, okay? So you want to make sure that you get those things up off the ground. Even a couple of inches of water can damage, major amounts of the electronic equipment. So you want to move that off the ground, get it up off the ground so that if you should have even minor or major flooding, it is up high. You want to make sure you secure it. You want to, again, locking it, meaning that you're securing it so that it can't shake off the wall or shake out of a cabinet should there be an earthquake or some kind of other thing that shifts the building's structure or infrastructure. You want to make sure that it's as firm as it can be against those items, okay? But you want to lock things up. You don't want your laptop sitting out on desks so that somebody can walk by in your retail store and just walk out with it, okay? Simple things like these cable locks can just be easily put on and attached to them. All of the laptops today have these locking capabilities, and it's a really great way for you to be able to secure and keep your your items safe. If something like your cell phone is too small and doesn't have a lock, for example, as I was talking to you, I'm looking at one of my laptops, and it actually doesn't have the laptop cable insertion. It wasn't built with it. So what I would have to do is I would have to put this inside of a drawer or put it inside of something and lock the drawer when I didn't have it in use. I don't want it just laying out on the desk, okay? So those need to be in the plan. Remember, you want to make sure that these things are all written in your plan. Next up is setting up a mobile command for your business. This happens to be the Verizon Mobile Command Center, so should Verizon need to come in and establish cellular service in an emergency location, this is what the inside of their Mobile Command Center looks like. It's pretty snazzy, and it's probably a multi-million-dollar unit on wheels, but you don't need to do that. What I really need you to do is to make sure that you have all of the necessary equipment to be able to make your business continue to function. So look at the core parts of your business, look at the core ways in which you can continue to execute your business's functions, and then figure out how to put that into a briefcase, into a case, into a crate, into a shopping cart, whatever it is that you can do in terms of making it mobile, and then making sure that you have the provisions necessary to make sure that you can set up and go should you need to. And last but not least is having the right technical contacts information at hand. I know that all of the other people that you have in your business, from your customers to your business contacts to government officials and so on and so forth, are really important. But if you do not have the technical people involved and there to be able to be contacted, and having backups to those people, of course, too, but have the right text contact information ready. If your computers go down and you can't remember the number to your IT department or you can't remember the number to your MSP, you need to be able to manage service provider. That's a type of IT support, folks. And you just need to make sure that you go ahead and have those people at the ready so that you can effectuate the plan and get them in to correct the technical problem, potentially diagnose the data corruption, loss, or theft, and then move forward so that you can, of course, effectively manage your business, because that's what it's all about, and continue to make money, right? So with that, I am going to talk about virus protection, and then I'm happy to take questions, which of course is the final strategy. You need to install virus protection. This is across whatever computer you have, whether it's a Mac or a PC or any other type of operating system. You have to have some kind of virus protection software on there. At the very least, you should be monitoring your ports. These are the gateways that computers communicate with one another. Okay, so when we talk about ports, the port on most computers out to the internet is called the port 8080, and that allows data from the web to come in. Of course, that allows all sorts of other kinds of malicious stuff, as well as the stuff that you request to come onto your computer. Well, you need to make sure that you have one of these softwares or another one that you trust, or that you've learned about that you trust, that of course goes ahead onto your computer and monitors to make sure that your email and your web browsing and so on and so forth are all covered in terms of, at least the major stuff, so that you're not affected by malicious software. Okay, and then of course you need to keep it updated. You don't need to be installing AVG version 4.0, that's outdated and it's not going to help you, and it's going to be worse because it's going to be slow and sluggish. It's going to be leaking leaking resources, so it'll be consuming more resources on your computer, so it'll move slower. You want to be able to have the latest updated program that's running efficiently and making sure that your computer is protected and up to date. Okay. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions folks have. Tracy, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer those, and otherwise we'll wrap up.
Well, so far, Ray, we don't have any questions. Let's give it a few minutes and see if anybody's got anything they want to ask.
Okay, wonderful. So, just think about this in the sense of, as we're waiting for questions, really think about promoting readiness, both to your employees and families, but also to your fellow small businesses, okay? Talk to coworkers, especially colleagues in the business who might have disabilities, and what assistance they might need should they have a disability in the emergency planning process, okay? Identify, people that are already doing it, and ask them what they're doing about getting ready for disasters. Again, like I said, this is not an if proposition, this is a when proposition. Disasters happen, and they happen on very small scales, and they happen on very large scales. You need to make sure that you're out there making sure that you are continuing your business operations and keeping yourself and your staff safe.
Well, Ray, it doesn't seem that we have any questions, so let's go ahead and wrap up today. Thanks, everyone, for participating. A few housekeeping items. Today's webinar was recorded and will be posted on the Virginia SBDC website under live webinars and recordings. Tomorrow you'll be receiving a follow-up email on the webinar, and there'll be an evaluation link in the email. Please help us to continue to improve our training by taking the time to fill that out. If you'd like to complete it now, I've put the link to it in the chat window for you. Our next webinar will be in September, and it's Tag Your It, Small Business Marketing Using Microsoft's Mobile Scanning Technology. Thank you, everyone, for attending today.